That's not to tell us a matter on a democratic consolidation. I'm on Lesotho. It's a male made in also quite. It's a male that the type of macata. Like I.
Do you know
A thing.
Sure.
The last time I got one, I got in Elega answer Roma when you're as our SRC president. How is your political journey so far?
I'm politically. I can't say I'm politically inactive.
Okay.
I'm very much exposed to political occurrences happening in our country at the moment.
Okay.
But I have decided to take a step back and watch from a distance, give myself time to learn, and perhaps in the future I'll be able to contribute meaningfully in the challenges that our country is facing.
Okay. Medino.
that?
When I was the political,
I'm a citizen, and I don't know, I was annoyed with what's happening in this country, and I realized that accountability is a major, so that the things that you see failing is something that you actually can do about it.
Some people we have had our independence in 1966. That's when we had our first election. And then after that we only had our democratic election in 1993. What do you think was the problem? What do you think independence was the problem?
Personally, I feel like we didn't have a clear sense of national identity. We adopted current trends that were taking place at the time. So African states are gaining independence. Great, this is fantastic. But in their independence, they're adopting systems that led to their failure or led to their suppression. So we didn't come up with a model that was by Basotho for Basotho, in the sense that already. We had a system of governance. We had principles laid down by Mushwesh. Instead of reverting back to that, we adopted a Western model of democracy. Hence, even our legislature and
well, I work at democracy. Couple that is a book before democracy.
A very good question. We, as a nation, historically, we haven't given ourselves enough space, enough time to try and interrogate the concept of democracy. Because democracy as a concept, like she says, Dineo, was born out of European epistemology. Democracy was very much, or is very much, likened to a well-functioning state. So upon independence, we didn't really understand what it means to be called a state. Because in actual fact, Africans existed in a way that differs very much to that of Europeans. And by virtue of that, the processes towards state formations in Europe and in Africa very much diverge. You see that? So let me give you an example. There is an adage or a doctrine, state makes war makes state. That is to say, a state is made up of a war. You see? That is to say, the process of state formation in Europe for the duration of 500 years was made up of wars. People wanted to defend themselves against invaders, enemies. And as a result, it was important to establish certain organs, the total of which is referred to as a state. And when we come to Africa, upon assumption of independence, the concept of state and democracy was just imposed, like she says. You see that? And immediately we wanted to behave like Europeans. So to answer your question, But first we have to understand what are we talking about?
Before independence, we had an emergence of Lekgotla la Bafo.
Good question.
Even though exact and 1919 emergency ya Lekgotla la Bafo to hlokomela hore it was fighting economic injustice and social injustices tsa Bafo in our country. And if re khutlela morao, it means re tlo fa marena puso hape. Do you think are we ready to fight dintlo tsena di lona ke Lekgotla la Bafo again? Kapo ona hana ho tla ba le few changes hona bana if re tsa.
I have an opinion that Basotho by formation about the state and formation and war and all of that, Lesotho became a nation out of war, necessity, because Tifaqan, as we all know. And Moshoeshoe brought in a system of rule where he consolidated other people under him. You know, he was elected. He saw himself as the people's servant. You know, if we were to go back to those principles and his ideas of innovation, by virtue of the fact that we are a united nation, kind of people, as in united tribes, united clans, or rather, by virtue of that, we bring very different pieces to what is now Lesotho, or who we are as a state. In the same way, we can bring a multitude of ideas together that can pave the way forward, that incorporate, okay, we can't erase our colonial past. It's a part of who we are. I'm a Western post-independent Mosotho. I'm very westernized. And that is beyond my control, and that is my reality. It doesn't diminish my Mosotho. You know, so how do we create a future that embraces all this diversity in who we are and stays true to where we come from, versus just adopting something that is thrust upon us, as is the tendency.
Democracy Lesotho monana ela ga bakela kotsi e kgolo haholo in 1970. In 1970, but went into exile. The election were null and void. There was a state of emergency. And problem, I work a history in 1970s, some people don't want to believe certain books. For instance, some people will say, no, I will never listen to Ndadesi because he's pro-BNP. I will never listen to Ndadesi because he's pro-BCP. I will never listen to Ndadesi because he's saving the rise of the royals. You understand? So how do we attack problems like what do you think about Lesotho in 1970?
It was a turning point. Also, consider what was going on in Africa in general. You had your Idi Amin's. It was wild in Africa at the time. So I guess dictatorship was like hot on the scene and everybody wanted a piece of the pie. And also, at the time, Lesotho was broke when it gained independence. And this is around the time when lots of monies are being given in grants to developing nations, right? So we are at the stage of trying to build an economy and work around being being autonomous, basically. Around 1970s when things are starting to maybe, clear up, and now you see opportunity. An election is held, it's null and void because someone decided it's null and void. But it set a precedence. Here we are now. It became the rule of law, basically. But there were so many other things that were happening behind the scenes, and such. So, again, we need to learn our history and know and understand dynamic things that are taking place, so that we know how to tackle these problems.
So how we are learning our history? Some people are about to remember some certain people because they were pro-what. Who do we listen to?
You have to be discerning. You have to be a critical thinker. You have to read all of these ideas and formulate your own. Out of sense, you will know now, okay, this is good factual information. Like, that's what we do every single day in every interaction we have. So why can't we do that in terms of reading our past?
And ke dumelana le tsona ka ho tlala. But I just want to ke kene pointing ena o hlahisitse batho ba bohlokwa ho bua ka bo ke seqisha, right? Le bo ntate Kgaketla bo mang. I think they will provide us a framework through which to discuss these issues.